All right, let's talk about getting our R5 Mark II up to a quick start and getting this puppy running and rolling fast as we can. Now, I'm not gonna go over every single detail of setting this camera up because obviously that's a whole different video, but today is what I would consider the absolute bare minimums you need to do to get yourself set up for the best success with this camera right out of the box. Oh, hey, and do me a favor, if you find this R5 Mark II video useful in any way, shape, or form, I'm going to be doing a lot of them coming up in the next couple of months, and just go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. It is so hard to keep a YouTube channel going these days, and your subscriptions are the only thing that keep this channel going. Now, one note before we even get to the camera setup itself is going to be on the batteries. Make sure you have at least a couple of the Canon LPE6P batteries. These are the new batteries for the Canon R5 Mark II. There's gonna be so much of this camera that's not even accessible to you if you don't have this. They've essentially crippled the camera without these batteries. Number one thing you're going to get. Now, when you go ahead and get the camera, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you the very first thing you should do. It's not even going to be a question of whether or not you should do it. Make sure you're clicked in the video mode, and I want you to go in the first menu, the red menu, and you're gonna go all the way here to the 10th screen. And there you're gonna see an auto power off temp. Now you wanna change that first thing you do. Make sure you set that to high. This is not gonna really, I've seen no way this actually damages the camera, and it really gets rid of that pesky overheating thing that you deal with the Canon R5 for most of the normal ways, except for the 8K60, just so you're aware. So make sure you set that on high. Next thing is going to be standby low res. It is on by default. Just make sure that's on, double check that, because that's something that you wanna make sure is on. That essentially lets your camera, when you're not recording, it's kind of got like a lower res preview thing here on the back. It is an incredible heat saver. Now, because we're starting here in the video menu, I'm gonna say go next to the image quality and size. Now, the main thing you need to understand is there's gonna be a difference between RAW, XFHEVC, and XFAVCS. Now, the main thing you need to know is this. If you work in XFHEVC, it's a high efficiency recording mode. It gets you really, really good quality at a very, very good compression rate. However, the downside of that is that it does do it in an H.265 format. So if you're thinking about doing that versus XFAVC, which has an H.264 format, is that some of your computers are gonna have a lot harder time dealing with the compression situation. Now, if you know you're gonna be making proxies or your computer can handle it, if you have a computer that can't handle it, do XFAVC. That's just something for you to know. It is a little bit different. You're gonna need to take some time when you're doing this to kind of balance between the two of them. You can shoot in RAW, but just be aware, if you cut this camera on and the RAW is grayed out, you might have digital image stabilization on. If you have digital IS set on in your camera, you cannot record in RAW. It has to be off to record RAW. Now, once you've set your shooting mode, you need to go ahead and maximize the dynamic range of this camera, right? And what you need to do is I would recommend coming into the fourth menu and come to custom picture mode. Now, it's off. If you cut it on, you're gonna get some options here where you can select a custom profile image. If you come here, you'll see you have Canon 709, Log 2, Log 3, different things like that. If you wanna get the maximum dynamic range from this camera, make sure you click on Canon Log 2. And then the last thing I would say when you're here in the video mode is on the sixth menu, go ahead and check out pre-recording. Now, if you're planning on doing a shoot real quick, that's going to be a lot of documentary or live action work, go ahead and set pre-recording on. It essentially creates a little buffer before you hit the record button. So you can either set it to a 5-second or a 3-second option, but it's just an incredible tool if you're filming live stuff, and it basically forms a little buffer. So whenever you hit the recording, it's like almost a time machine that goes back and gets those 5 seconds or 3 seconds before you hit the button. If you're not doing a lot of live shooting, if you're not worrying about getting things like right on the split second, take that off, save your battery, save your hard drive space, and you'll be in good shape. But it is something you should know depending on the shoot you're about to run into. Now, in a quick start area, there's one thing, especially if you're new to this camera, I would recommend taking a second and setting up, and that's gonna be your quick controls. Now, if you hit Q here on the back of your camera, it's gonna pull up a quick control dial. And the best thing about that is you'll see it gives you options to a lot of the main things that you'll access and change whenever in a set. And the good news about this is you can customize this to get the quick controls that make the most sense for you. Especially when you're coming on a new camera like the Canon R5 Mark II, it's nice to have these controls really fast to get to, so you don't have to worry about digging in menus and trying to figure out what it is. Now, the way to do that is you can come here into Customize Quick Controls on the 7th menu in the red thing. You click on that, and now you can basically do Edit Setup. And what is gonna happen, it's gonna come up, and now you'll see all this stuff in there. What is you can access is checked, and then there's other options here you can get access. You can arrange that, put it on, click things on and off, but it is something that is good to know to kind of set this camera up so you can quickly operate it as fast as possible based on the way you like to work. Now those are the quick red video setups. I would go and do some photo setups too, because if you're a photographer, some quick things to do. I would definitely come to the image type and size. It's on RAW. I would definitely turn that into a compact RAW shooting style. I've done thousands of pictures in compact RAW. There's a very, very tiny difference. It's almost impossible to see unless you're really pushing an image all the way to the max. And it just gives you a ton more space on your card, and more important, it lets you really access the buffer without filling up that buffer space, because the compact RAW is so much faster and so much smaller to work with. Now once you set that up, there is one other thing about this camera that from a photo mode I had to change because it was driving me crazy. It may drive you crazy, it may not, but it's just one of those things I like to let you know about. And that is, if you look here on the right side of the screen, my exposure level dial is on this vertical side on the right. I hate that. I really want it to be down on the bottom where it has been traditionally for most of my career. I'll show you a quick way to change that. Just come over here into the 9th red menu. You're gonna go to shooting info display. You gotta scroll down there. You'll see vertical exposure level. Cut that to off. Then you say okay. And now you will see it is down here on the bottom where it's traditionally been. Good little thing to have if that's something that bothers you. All right, now let's go to autofocus, because there's a lot of changes in autofocus in the Canon R5. The first thing you want to do, just make sure if you're shooting something where you're going to track people, make sure you're set here in servo mode. And you also can go to the next menu and do subject to detect, which will let you focus on people. If you're primarily on people, you can do an auto, which will let the camera kind of detect. Or if you're on animals, vehicles, other things like that, you can kind of set that. It's a nice kind of option to have. It basically lets the AI autofocus system be more aggressive in what it focuses on. Now, the next autofocus thing you want to come is you're going to come over to this servo autofocus character, and this is kind of interesting in that R5 Mark II because it basically says auto and manual. Those are the options. It's a very different set of formats. Now, I personally found that the auto was a little too aggressive for me, and so I wanted to set it to manual. I would recommend, if you come, set this to manual, and then come in and basically take the tracking sensitivity down a little bit so it's a little more locked in and not so jumpy. That's going to be something up for you, but I found if I was doing a quick setup, that's something I wanted to set up right away just so I could get things a little more locked on and better. And the last focus tool I would recommend on the Canon R5 in a quick start guide is going to be coming in over here to focus guide in the 6th menu and cutting that on. And one thing about that, if I switch my lens to manual, now you'll see this great little icon there that just really makes manual focus an absolute joy to have. If you cut it off, it will cut off, but it's one of those things that makes our lives a heck of a lot better when you are shooting. Now, when it comes to the blue menu, there's not a lot I'm going to tell you to set up real quick. You know, we're going fast. This is a quick start guide. However, there is one that I do think is important, and that's in the last menu. I like to turn highlight alert into enable. And what that essentially does, if I take a picture or I'm doing any kind of playback, it kind of shows me a blinking area to let me know if I have any overexposed, no information areas. I find that super, super useful. I always set that to enable because it's just a good, quick feedback when you're in the field and running. Now, in the yellow menu, there's a lot of things here that you can look at. You know, make sure you know where your format card button is in the first one, because you want to be able to set your cards now to the new Canon R5 II ecosystem. But the things that I think are really important for setting up your run and gun is the first one in the second menu is there is a beep in the camera. People find this distracting. I'm deaf, I can't hear it anyway, so I just make sure I go ahead and disable the beep. The other section of the yellow menu I would do when I'm starting up for the first time is to take a look at your power saving options, because this is something that could absolutely drive you crazy. Now, if you come to power savers, you will see a screen dimmer and a screen off, and you can set these for various defaults. I think it's set for like 20 seconds when you first cut on the camera. I found this incredibly annoying to have my camera set up and the screen starts dimming on the back and I had to keep on tapping it. I hated that, so I just disabled that and turned it off, and I just put a auto power off at 5 minutes. This worked really well for me. I really didn't notice any real big battery issues with this, honestly, when I did it. So I would recommend disable screen dimmer, disable screen off, save yourself the frustration of having to come over and tap the camera when it's still on. All right, now we're gonna come over to the new green menu that used to be orange, and the first thing I would recommend you do is anytime you set up a camera, take a minute and come to this customize buttons and go ahead and set the buttons the way you want. This is definitely something the first time you get a camera, you should go ahead and start customizing this just to make your life easier as you get ready to go out there and start shooting. Now, as far as the orange menu goes, there's a lot of stuff to go into as far as setting up and
dialing it. But if you're going for a quick start, I think the most important one is going to be here on the third menu, and that is going to be your continuous shooting speed. Now, you can actually set this for up to 30 frames per second if you're using electronic shutter and other things like that. Now, the good news is you can actually, if you look here, you can dial that between 20 and 30. And let's be honest, a lot of times 30 is going to be overkill for a lot of what we need to do. So you can put it at like 20, save your buffer. It just depends if you're doing like sports and high action things or if you're doing more slow pace things. It's really, really nice having that. And really the last thing I would point out is if you come to the very last light green menu, you can set up custom menus that essentially allow you to access any part of the menu that you really find yourself going to a lot. The great thing about this is you can make a number of these. So if you look here, I've made one for video shortcuts and I've made one for photo shortcuts. I'll probably end up making some for time lapses and other aspects like that. So it's just really, really nice to set that up. It will save you a ton of time on set and really make your life a lot easier. Whew, okay, so there you go. That is what I would consider the quick start, as much time as that took on getting this thing up to running in a basic setup for you to go. Now, obviously, there's a lot more depth that I didn't go into, but this is one of those things that you want to start setting up to get this camera up and running. Anyway, guys, I'd love to hear what you have to say with this. Leave me notes and comments down below, and yeah, go out there, keep on shooting, and yeah, I'll talk to you soon.